Okay, so this is a hard one to make because I have been trying to figure out how to solve a puzzle. And this is something that I would actually really love comments and feedback and a discussion about, because there is something fundamentally wrong here, and I feel like there should be a solution somehow. And that is, I was doing a deep dive into ISBNs and their purpose. And I'll just say in short, ISBNs in the modern digital age doesn't necessarily make any sense. Their original intent was more for logistics, to have a serial number so when you sold them to stores, the sellers and the publishers could keep track of the inventory. But it doesn't necessarily make sense when you have ebooks. So like an ISBN on an ebook doesn't make a lick of sense since there's no overhead. And even with this like print on demand, Amazon KDP, it also is kind of like, what is the ISBN for if we're not doing a print run? But that's kind of its own subject. The only reason I looked into it was because when I first went to publish The Chaos Child, everyone was recommending Ingram Sparks, as in they will get you into bookstores. Not exactly. But what happened is that I went to set up my files, and I immediately had to put in my ISBN. And I went, okay. I was under the impression that I could always take my ISBN elsewhere because I had personally paid for it. But no. What happened is I put my ISBN. They then told me I had 2 weeks from when I plugged in that number to design my book, get a proof copy, and then revise it if I didn't like it. And I went, okay, that's way too short, but I did it. And the proof copy I got back was so bad. Like the print quality, everything about it. It had a matte cover that just, it felt like crap to touch. And it was so bad that for The Chaos Child, when I eventually went to Lulu to publish it, I was so put off by how the Ingram Sparks publishing print went, that I actually did a glossy cover, which I cannot change at this point, even though I printed to Ford Rayburn on a matte cover, which looks a lot better. But c'est la vie. And then when I tried to take down the file from Ingram Sparks, they wouldn't release it. They said technically I had already published it through them because I had printed one copy and I couldn't fully delete it, and I couldn't get my ISBN back, which I had purchased. So I always go, Ingram Sparks stole my ISBN. And then I've heard stories of how like they don't actually get you into bookstores. They just put an online shop and say good enough. And part of the reason people go for them is also because they're cheaper, but again, the quality is so poor that it's not worth it. Like I saw an Ingram Sparks printed book out in the wild, and I immediately didn't want to buy it because of how like it just felt awful to hold. Like, and paper was thin. It was just bad. It was just bad. So I eventually went to Lulu because with Lulu, you can set up your files, you can revise to your heart's content until you get it to where you want before plugging in your ISBN. And even with The Chaos Child, when I went to do some like another editing pass, a couple years later, I was able to re-upload the file under the same ISBN. I just couldn't change the cover to matte like I wanted. So I would recommend Lulu just for printing, just because it was just so much better to use, but it is more expensive to use, and it doesn't necessarily have the same capacity for like global distribution. You can put it up for global distribution on Lulu, but you're going to make like cents on your book if you do that. So right now, by the way, I have my books up for sale on Lulu as a print-on-demand option where you just go to their site and purchase it directly from there. And the links are in the description. But that being said, I didn't want to use Amazon at all. I didn't even consider it. It's mostly because there's just something that really, really bothered me about it instinctually. I heard through the grapevine things about how you're not going to be pushed up, you're not really going to be marketed, which is part of the reason you do it, that the AI slop is really taking over, that you get buried, etc., etc. And then when I was like looking at it, I went, I feel like there's like copyright issues. Now, the deeper I've gone into this, the more I realize it's probably not copyright per se. Copyright is one of these weird things where every country has their own copyright rules, and reality is that if you write something and you publish it in any platform, you do hold the copyright. Most of the time when you're like buying back your rights or something, you're usually buying back your IP rights. That's just my understanding. I could be totally wrong, but from what I've seen from different lawsuits that I've seen and different things, and even like in college, I was told like you own your papers now, even though they're in the school database. So you write something, you always own what you write. What you don't necessarily own is IP rights and distribution rights. And that's where I think a lot of people do get into trouble when they're on Amazon. And this is me speculating. Because as I put out that video before, which I was like, hey, why don't the publishers just pick up people that they find on Amazon? Like, why not? And I think it has to do with distribution. It's because of this. It's the only thing that trad publishers can offer at this point is distribution. They don't necessarily even offer marketing anymore. I have seen forum posts where people have talked about how they'll only take influencers or Wattpad authors or fan fiction authors because they already have the following, so they're already guaranteed the sales, at least so they think. I think there's issues with that. And then when you see people who don't have that online presence who do then blow up, it's usually some sort of nepotism, like full stop, or let's call it what it is. You yourself, untested, untried author who published on Amazon, you're not going to get a deal. And even if your book blows up, it seems like people don't necessarily get book deals despite being proven at that point and having an audience. They might get okay, your next book, don't put it on Amazon, go for us, but the current books just have to stay on Amazon. And so my theory, and I could be wrong, but this is just my theory, is that why would Amazon want to put your book up if they had your book and they had just cut out the middleman, which is the publisher, which would take a cut, and they could just sell directly and basically pocket all the profits except the bit that they share with you. So Amazon and even Ingram Sparks to an extent have kind of set themselves up as distributors, and because they're the most centralized and kind of the only one, like I've seen this for myself, is your book's on Amazon? Is your book on Amazon? Like, no, I'm sorry, no. Yeah, that's the place people go initially, and even if it gets published by a trad publisher, you kind of go to Amazon because usually you can get a deal that you can't get at Barnes & Nobles. Yeah, so Amazon has kind of become more of a distributor than anything else. And it seems to me like if you publish through Amazon, what you're losing is, in some ways, that chance to be picked up by the publisher, and also in some ways, partially your distribution rights. I'm not entirely sure, it's a theory, but to me that's scummy, especially when they don't necessarily market, because again, if the trad publishers can only really offer you distribution and ability to get into bookstores, then Amazon's doing that as well, but they do not market you, and they bury you, and they do a lot of stuff because they just don't care. It's just, you're fodder. You are just fodder for their system at this point, and it shows, right? And also there's like issues with like copyright. I've seen so many people talk about that, where they didn't realize they were using AI for parts of their book and then got copyright struck, and then they lost all the revenue from the book and they couldn't really appeal or anything. Yeah. So I wouldn't go through Amazon for many, many reasons, but the main one is this distribution issue. If there is a slight chance I could like sell my soul to the devil and get a huge contract from a trad publisher, I mean, I'd take it. I'm a little hypocritical. I think we all are. But you lose that chance if you go through Amazon. That's what I've noticed. And so when I try to think about it, what is holding indie and self-published authors back? I know they're pretty much the same thing, but still. I think it is this distribution question. It's this problem of like, so we have these print-on-demand options, which are amazing. They do cut down overhead and make it so much easier to sell books in theory. But then it's also harder to get into bookstores, and you also have to like personally print your own things, and it's a whole thing, right? And the reality is, since we can buy our own ISBNs, which again I said is kind of nonsensical, but still you still have to do it. You could, in theory, just like set up a print shop in your garage and probably print your books cheaper than you can on these print-on-demands, but like you have the option for print-on-demand. You also have the option to learn to do it yourself and try to cut those costs down, which I've been thinking about because I do think the cost is part of the prohibitiveness of us getting anywhere. But there's answers to that. There's a solution to that. There's ways to get around that. The distribution, on the other hand, that seems harder. Like, I too have schlepped my books to bookstores around the area and put them in the store and said, please sell, and hopefully something comes of it. I'm doing this, right? I'm doing my best. But I do not have what Amazon has. I do not have what the trad publishers have. I do not have direct access to Barnes & Nobles and other booksellers, even used booksellers, who are buying directly from some of these publishers or being given books directly from the publishers. And so I just don't know what the answer is here. And it's a puzzle I'm trying to figure out, because to me, if we could figure out distribution and we could say sayonara to all these Amazon trad publishers, etc., we would win. Because that's the only thing that's holding us back. Most of the time, our books are better written. Most of the time, our books are better edited. I know there's a lot of crap out there, but ignoring the crap. I've read some really good ones, and I think there's ways to build up the community and to build up an infrastructure where we can all help each other to have better books that put the trad publishers to shame. Because I've said in a previous video, they're hiding so many mistakes behind, it's a pretty book, and this idea because they're trad publishers, they're somehow more legitimate than we are. But if you learn the skills, and most of these skills you can learn on your own, then you can compete. But the only thing I can't see us competing with is the distribution. And so, I don't know. I want to crack it. Because I think if we can crack it, we can really give them a run for their money.